Hi, and welcome to the first episode of our podcast. Today we have a very special guest, which is our very own Selma, who is the most recent employee to join Toddle. And today we're going to talk a little bit about you, why you joined Toddle, and what that means for both Toddle and for potentially all of the future of web development. So, Salma, welcome, and thank you very much for joining.
Thank you. There's some bold claims that you made just there, Andreas.
That's how we like it.
Good.
So, do you want to maybe tell a little bit about yourself and your background?
My background starts, I guess, from the age of 6. I always tell this story when I wrote my first lines of code on a Commodore 64, and I loved it. Had no idea what I was doing, though. I was writing BASIC, it turns out, which I learned a while ago. And the thing about growing up in the early 90s, mid 90s, and wanting to get into tech is that it wasn't very easy. There wasn't the internet, there wasn't tutorials, nothing was available. So I got into music. And so my whole childhood was music. Although saying that, I did make websites on GeoCities when it first came out and when I first got the internet. Loved it.
Classic.
And so I went the music route, I did a music degree. And a lot of the time when you're a musician, you need to teach to pay bills. So I ended up music teaching. I started by doing a variety of things, including I taught flute, I taught at a music college, and I taught kids how to be in rock bands. And I really enjoyed that. So I decided to become a qualified teacher. And I taught music in secondary schools for a while. And then I quit. Long story, I quit. And I ended up getting a minimum wage job in a call center, as you do. And long story, but from that, I got into development. Front-end development specifically. I ended up getting a few front-end dev jobs. I worked at startups and large companies, e-commerce, the lot, and was a tech lead for a while. And then when 2020 came around, I started streaming on Twitch, mainly to keep up my tech skills, because as a tech lead, I was doing less and less coding, and that was the reason that I got into it. So I started streaming on Twitch, building stuff in public. A whole new world opened up to me of developer education and developer relations, that kind of thing. And then I ended up getting my first job in DevRel. I hate the term developer relations, DevRel. I like to say developer education. Got my first job in that, and a few other jobs later, here I am at Toddle as head of developer education.
Exactly. Yes, so that quite a journey and a lot of I think what is it people call it, non-traditional background. Is that
Yes.
the common phrase? So I
Yes.
find quite a lot of people have non-traditional backgrounds, enough for it to be almost the norm.
Yes,
point,
I
isn't it?
agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a traditional background, and people going to university will then become the non-traditional.
Yes, probably.
Yeah.
It's
Excellent.
too expensive.
Well, it depends on where you're coming from. I mean, if you're in Denmark, then it's free.
Oh, well, lucky you.
Yeah,
Let's move to Denmark.
You can all come here. Probably not.
No.
Yeah. So I mean, that's interesting. We've obviously already seen a lot of your content and like the sort of the way you've done it, especially your approach, which is very open, very honest approach to education. Very much about. I don't know that you've ever cut out any bugs or things that didn't work. I think that seems to be a lot of keep it all in approach.
Because that's real life, isn't it? That's real software development. Most of it is debugging, learning how things work that have no documentation or are legacy systems. Like I come from a real software development background job kind of environment, and that's what you do all day. And I think you can't you can't ignore that, because that's life, and that's what I try to bring to what I do. I don't know everything. I will never know everything. I'm always learning something every day. And I think that honest approach makes people know that you're one of them, which is very important, I think, when teaching and educating.
Absolutely. I very much agree. And I think it's something that's maybe easy to overlook, because, as you said, software development really is just a constant switch between why isn't this working and wait, why is this working?
Yes.
And then back and forth continuously, right? Like it's difficult. And I think there's a growing trend I've noticed, or maybe not growing, but a long-term trend of sort of trying to downplay what we do as software developers. A lot of like, we're just copy pasting from Stack Overflow. Or, I don't know how the code works. I never know how anything works. And what I've found, at least in the recent years, is that it has a real negative effect on people getting into the industry, because when they don't actually, like, they feel like there's no end to the sort of early challenges. So I think showing the full thing, both the good and the bad, of someone who has a lot of experience, I think it's such a nice and such a different approach to education, where so many just show, look at me, hard code everything, but like show the full thing, show everything.
It is very interesting you mention when people are getting into software and how people make it look so easy. I do get a lot of people talking to me, especially in my streams, asking me, what's the quickest way I can do this? How can I learn software development in 5 weeks? How can I bypass all of the like deep learning to become successful? And the answer is you can't. You can't. Everything comes from experience, and that's the bottom line.
Yes, that's very, very true. And I think that's one of the most key thing people miss, that it's the bit when it's really hard and when you really have to struggle and when you really feel like you don't understand what's going on. That's actually the moments where you get better. And
then you can do it quicker the next time. Even if you have to Google it, you know what to Google. And that's it. So a lot of people will say, Salma, how do you know this? And it's like, well, I've done it like 10 times already. Granted, recursion. I was having problems with recursion recently because I've only really had to use recursion like 3 times in my whole career. So there are some things that people really think you need to study really hard and know. And otherwise you're not a real developer. But like some things you just don't need, and learn them when you need them, and don't overwhelm yourself. Like, do it as you go. And that's another key point to education as well. It's like, you can't just give everyone everything at once and expect them to be successful. You have to tell a story. You have to ease them in, and you have to provide the why and context for everything you're teaching them and doing. It's a Pedagogy 101.
Exactly. Something that unfortunately is often missing from the very fancy free educations you get in places like Denmark is that you end up doing 5 years of mostly theory, and then you have to figure out how to make it apply in the real world after. I don't know, at least in software development, it's probably not the smartest way of doing it. But yeah, I very much agree.
There's a lot of conversation as well around the difference in developers who have a computer science degree or software engineering degree and people who don't. And like you say, it's all about context. I know some people who have done 4 or 5 years of computer science education, and because the curriculum moves very slowly in big institutions and there has to get signed off, and I think the web is moving a lot faster. I'm not here to poo-poo degrees in anything like this, but I think the web moves incredibly fast and the curriculums can't catch up, and there's also not the opportunity to put those theory learnings into real context, like real software, real teams, real application, and making production sites with real users as well. And I think there's a lot to be said for just doing it the way you need to as well. Because like, I don't believe really in roadmaps to becoming a software developer, because everyone's roadmap is different. A lot of people ask me, Salma, what's your roadmap? It's like, well, my roadmap is completely weird. I learnt CoffeeScript before JavaScript and SAS syntax before real CSS. I had a completely backwards way of doing it. But it worked for me because I just fell in the deep end and had to learn how to swim, so to speak. So it's different for everyone, and you have to make it personal to yourself depending on your needs and what you want to achieve.
You don't need to learn to play the flute and you practice your scales before getting into CoffeeScript. That isn't for everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah. That makes sense. No, I think that's a common misconception, and I also think that most of the conversation about university versus whatever other path you chose to get in here, like as long as you get in and start working, start building stuff, I don't know that there's a preference. If you happen to live in a country where, or you have the kind of parents where it doesn't matter, where education is easily to have access to, good for you, make the best out of it. That's a great way to get started. If you have other opportunities, choose those. It's not going to hold you back that much not having gone to university. I actually never finished my degree. I have what's called 5 ECTS points short, which is about a 1 class a week course for 6 months short of an actual degree. And it literally never mattered. And I never went back and got it.
There you go.
Because what mattered, what really is the knowledge you got away from it. Nobody asked since. So not advice on education or not that. Like if you're a lawyer, it's a different conversation. Don't take my advice on it. I'm talking specifically for software, right? But there are many ways to do that. There's many ways to get here. There aren't any secrets, I can tell that. I think I'm okay to say there aren't any big secrets that people with university degrees have that we don't tell anyone else. That's not a thing. So whatever your path in, the most important thing is really that you spend your time and that you keep learning, because it doesn't end, right?
Never ends.
Great. So I think one topic that may be a little bit interesting. So we're talking a lot about how it's not easy to build software at all, and even a little bit, right? And yet we built this tool that supposedly does make it easier. By being visual, you don't need to know as much syntax. You don't spend your time in the code. So isn't that for you? Isn't that kind of a contrast to your belief than using a tool like Toddle?
Do you know what? No, because everything, from what I understand, I'm pretty new to this whole space, and what got me interested in it was the fact that you still have to know stuff to build stuff in Toddle. You still have to know how the web works. You still have to know the differences between different types of rendering, like on the server, on the client. You still have to know how browser security works and whether or not you should be exposing particular API keys. You still have to know how to make accessible experiences in your UI, and you still have to understand who you're building your product for. And, I've used pretty much every front-end framework out there. I've tried pretty much every one, and they're kind of all the same, with just different syntax, different opinions, but they've all got the same issues. And, if anyone out there who's watching this has watched my streams, you'll see that a lot of the time, the opinions and the mental models around these code-based frameworks, if they're not intuitive for that particular individual, they make that particular individual feel stupid and like they can't do anything. And this is not a dig at framework authors. Like, framework authors have a difficult job to do the things that they are doing. And I've always wanted actually to be part of a framework team for these reasons. And I think that's one of the reasons why I joined Toddle, because as a teacher and as someone who is a practitioner of the things they teach, I think I have a unique angle that I can provide to help make the developer experience of these frameworks better. And I've done a lot of work over the last few years working with framework authors and even deployment platforms, helping to make the experience the best it can be for someone who is just your average software developer. Because I think a lot of the time, frameworks and the fancy things that are written in frameworks and the clever abstractions and the clever speeding up of everything, a lot of the times they are done for other framework authors because it's cool and clever and new and exciting and at the cutting edge of what code can do. But the average developer working in your average 9-to-5 job, that stuff doesn't really matter. And what matters is how you interact with framework APIs and how you build UIs and how you make it work for your users. And so I think I really wanted to be able to contribute in this way to something at this scale, and especially for something that's so unique as Toddle, because I think taking away all of that, the need to write opinionated code and the need to assimilate to a particular mental model in code, when you take that away, I think there's the opportunity to really empower a developer with the developer experience to build stuff faster, but not just faster, better, and with a greater understanding of what you're actually building, because all the other nuts and bolts of the framework in code and the syntax just doesn't get in the way. And I can't remember the question you asked me, but I just said some words then.
They were surprisingly well aligned with the question, actually. So if it was pure luck, then I would say good on you.
Thank you.
No, the question was whether your history of developer education and these things, how that aligned with a company like Toddle. And I think you're absolutely right. And what we see a lot of time is that because Toddle is a visual tool, a lot of people come in with an assumption of like, then you don't have to learn anything. Then you know the UI will be intuitive, so I'll already know how to use it, and that isn't true. Simply because programming is hard and it's not intuitive at all. Actually, it's one of the least intuitive things I think people have ever come up with. Must be programming. So it's not, but it helps, but it doesn't take away the hard part. Building applications just as hard as it always was. And that's good, because that's why there's a need for software developers in the end. So it's not a terrible thing that programming is hard.
And I think with every advance in the framework world, framework authors are trying to make things easier. And I think that also is that statement is supported by the ecosystem around certain frameworks like UI libraries, component libraries, plugins, integrations, packages, etc. Like everyone is always trying to make it more straightforward to get what you need done. But then with those other tools, you still need to learn other syntaxes, other mental models. And so I think a lot of the time people ask questions like, how do I get started in XYZ framework? And then there will be a lot of people who have had success in one way. And so they'll recommend like a suite of 10 tools. Use this database, use this component library, use this API, use this backend. And how can you be successful straight away when you have 10 things to learn all at once? And so if you take some of the things away, then that in theory helps you go faster, and also reduces the mental load, and hopefully will make you feel less incapable, more capable, and less stupid, more clever. Because it's always great as a software developer when you're doing something and it's successful and it makes you feel smart. In 10 minutes, you'll probably feel stupid again, but that moment of when you feel like a genius, that's what's kept me in software development, because it's really satisfying, and it makes you like it does stuff in your brain, like it connects pathways in your brains, and like, yes, I've done that and I can do it again, and I can do something else and I'm unstoppable. But the more barriers you put in the way of that, the more likely people are going to quit or are going to feel like slower and downtrodden and not like they're not having fun at their job or their hobby. And so the easier you can make it for people to do what they know how to do, the better.
Yes, I very much agree. You touched on something, and you brought it up before. This is sort of feeling stupid a lot of time in building software, and the few times where you get to feel smart. And I think it's a really interesting topic, because I think the reality is I'm confident that every software developer in the world feels stupid a lot of the time when they're building. I almost made a test that if you never feel stupid, you're probably stuck career-wise. Because it's just a natural part of learning and trying to do things that are more complex. But I think for a lot of beginners, it can be a real sort of blocker for getting into development. And I think there's way more people who would really enjoy this field and this profession than are currently aware of it. And a lot of it is probably because they have these sort of, I don't understand how it works. I could never understand a thing like that. And even if they gave it a shot, maybe like whatever the person on the other side said didn't make any sense and they felt stupid. Right? So I think this sort of feeling, there's almost like a managing your feeling stupid in some way, because you can't make it go away. So I'm interested, like as a teacher, I'm interested in what your take on is on that.
Yeah, so you learn this concept when you're learning how to teach of what's called differentiation. And the core concept is about making your material and the concept accessible to the least experienced person, but also at the same time being able to stretch the most able person. And I try to embody that in everything I do. It's like there's no question that is stupid. Everyone should be asking questions. Ask more questions, the better. And that also helps the teacher understand how to pitch stuff going forward. But like, for example, there are quite a few people in the wild guilty of using jargon and acronyms and concepts that on the face of it are completely impenetrable. And I still have problems with some of those phrases and things. Like I have big problems with words like syntactic sugar for some reason, because it means nothing. It means nothing. And what words that, like primitives, I know what primitives means, but like it doesn't add anything to the conversation when you are like throwing out these words left, right and center that get in the way of the actual core concepts that you could explain in clean English language. And so, and what's good about approaching it that way is that you can the least experienced people can access that plain language, and the most experienced people can also access it, but in their brains, they're processing the other more complex stuff in the background. So I think language is a powerful tool for education and the way you communicate ideas. And I like to communicate ideas with my primary audience is someone knows nothing about what I'm saying. Like there is no pre-assumed knowledge. And if you have that pre-assumed knowledge, great. But I don't need to cater to you because it's already catered to you. And so whenever you're mentioning an acronym, explain it first. Whenever, and even like link off to the definition if you're writing a blog or whatever, no matter what, right? Don't assume that anyone reading that is going to have that knowledge. And it's a tiny little detail, but like in any conversation that you have, especially like when live streaming, always explain things like that no matter what. It takes a little bit longer, right, to get your point across, but like it helps people access the content and therefore they are more engaged and they won't switch off. And then they'll maybe think, maybe I can do this because actually it's not that hard. Other people just made it sound hard. And I think that there is a tendency in the industry to gatekeep around that kind of knowledge. It's like, oh, if you don't know what this acronym means, then this isn't for you. But like, why?
Yeah.
Tell me what the acronym means. Tell me the concept. And because it, like we say, programming is hard, and it is, right? But actually, when you strip it all down, it's not that hard when you know what it means and when you know how it works. And so tell people how it works, and they will learn, and they will come back to you, and they will be engaged, and they will not feel stupid.
Yeah. I mean, technically everything is easy if you know how it works, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's still hard. It's hard piecing it all together. It's an interesting conversation. It's hard, but it's not hard when you've done it before, and it's but it's still hard if it's in a different context. So you can't. There's no right answer to a lot of these things. There's no like black and white to it, and I think a lot of people out there are yearning for the black and white and the right answer. A lot of people, they'll ask me a question, Salma, how do I do this? It's like, well, there's 10 ways you can do it, but tell me the right way. But no, there are 10 ways you can do it depending on your use case and your users and your framework and the devices that your users are using. And people, I think, struggle with not having the right answer, and they struggle with lacking the confidence to commit to an answer and then see if it works or not.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I also want to say, like, because programming is for so many people a profession with a non-traditional entry, and there's not a standard way to get into it. Not even if you go to university. Each university will teach different things. It also means that every experienced developer in the world has a couple of massive gaps in their knowledge of stuff. Everybody else will say, well, you surely you must know that now. Everyone has it, and it can often, if you're upfront about it, can be quite funny sometimes to see what it is that you somehow just never came across, even though other people feel like they do it every day. But this is completely normal, right?
It's funny, in 2020, for some reason, Rust was like the new hotness, and I thought, oh, why not? I'll learn some Rust live on stream. And it attracted... The stream attracted the very back-endy developers, Rust developers, like machine code developers. And coming from a front-end development background, there were huge gaps in my knowledge, basically about how machine code works. But for Rust, you kind of have to know that. And the amount of people that said, I can't believe you don't know this, was astounding, actually. But that's all they've ever known. But they wouldn't know how to center a div.
Which, quite frankly, in these days, isn't that hard anymore.
Well, true. But I can do it in 20 ways because there are so many ways to do it. But that was interesting because
sounds like a video coming.
Actually,
Selma,
yeah, good idea.
20 ways to sensitive.
That was a random number, but now I'm going to try and challenge myself to 20 ways.
It's got to be 20 now.
But, and I haven't really needed that knowledge. I haven't needed the machine code knowledge and all of those pointers and things like that. So I haven't learned it haven't learned it further because it doesn't affect my day to day. And vice versa, a lot of people working closer to those kind of systems won't need to know how to center a div. And that's just the way it is. And it shows the huge variety of opportunities available in software development itself as well.
Absolutely. It's such a big field that there's no way to know it all. You can kind of usually pick exactly where you want to sit professionally, and there'll be room for you there, almost certainly.
Come on in.
Exactly. So now that you are joining Toddle, now that you're going to do developer education for this whole I think for many people, very different approach to programming. Obviously, Toddle is not all that different. We're borrowing a lot from all the major frameworks. It's still programming. It's still the web. Still all the thing that people know. But it does feel very different, especially when you get into it. So what can we expect? What kind of content, what kind of education should we expect from you in the future?
So it's all about how the web works, basically. All about how the choices that you make in your application inform the the experience of how your application works on the web. And this will go down to things like different types of page rendering, how JavaScript like actually works, CSS, and how that can affect things like performance and accessibility and usability, and how to build performant applications in terms of back end, front end, like do you need to do that on the client or the server? And it all comes down to building the best app website for your use case and your situation. And I think, you know, as we said before, there's no right answer a lot of the time for some of these things. And so I'll be giving you options. You might want to do this, you might want to do that. This is a decision you might need to consider. And at the root of it, I just love helping people make good websites and web apps, whatever that means, you know, whether it's for 100 scores on Lighthouse, or whether it's like a really intuitive UI, or an accessible form, and using the platform and on things like forms. Do you need to use JavaScript for that, or can that just be HTML? Like all of these things that I've accumulated knowledge-wise in my career so far. And, you know, the web is changing and evolving at a stupid speed. And so I'll be investigating new features, new ways of doing things, and showing you how you can achieve that in Toddle, whether you should do this yet or not, browser support and all of that good stuff. Just like what you should consider, how you should approach things, and how to just succeed, hopefully. That's my goal.
That sounds great. Sounds like a lot of good stuff coming. I think we sort of reached the end of it. Do you have anything you feel like we missed? I think this sort of marks the end of a very good conversation, doesn't it? It's a good note to end on.
You haven't asked me one question, which I thought you were going to ask, which why did I choose Toddle? Why? Why did Toddle stand out? And I will answer that as I have just asked it.
Yes, it's a good question.
So, you know, as I mentioned before, I have used pretty much all the front end frameworks, and they're all pretty much the same. And a lot of them, some of the time, make me feel stupid. And it's like I feel like my brain is like wrong for them sometimes. Some of the decisions that the engineers made, I feel like, well, this wasn't for me. But, you know, you keep building in them because that's all there is. You keep going, you'll choose the next framework, you'll try and replicate something. Oh, it doesn't work again. I have to just do this hacky thing. And when I discovered Toddle, I thought, maybe this is for me. Maybe this solves that problem. Maybe, but also maybe I have the opportunity also personally, selfishly, to help turn that into something that I've wanted for a long time. And I haven't necessarily wanted a visual programming tool, but I've wanted a different way to do stuff. I wanted to do something that's at the forefront of a category. And to like change the narrative, or to influence the narrative about how web development is evolving. And it's been my little dream to work for a company of this size at the forefront of something. And I think Toddle is at the forefront of something. And I thought maybe selfishly I could profit from that. There you go.
Hopefully so.
It intrigued me. It really, really intrigued me. And I think it's got a good thing going. And I am fully on the endorsement train for this tool.
That's good to hear. I will say, as the original inventor who sort of started the whole project, I never thought visual programming was for me. Never ever. Like I even when I started the project, I didn't believe much in visual programming. I didn't think it made much sense. I was extremely skeptical. It took me probably a year to come around to the idea, because I wanted to build the UI, but it was for the longest time just write all the logic in JavaScript, because why would you want to do that visually? And it was only sort of through a gradual process figure out, it's so annoying to have to switch to writing JavaScript just for this one little thing. And eventually, as I kept adding more to the visual editor to avoid having to switch context, I sort of realized that actually that there aren't almost any cases where I want to switch. Staying in a context does make sense. But it was, for me, that took a year to convince myself that that was the right thing to do. I was extremely skeptical. Yeah. I've never met anyone who was as skeptical about the concept as I was when I started working on it. So.
That's a good endorsement that needs to go on the website.
Yeah,
even I didn't believe in Toddle when I first invented it.
It's a grumpy old man saying, "Nah, it's humbug." Yeah. Exactly, but it's very much true. I had to build all of Toddle in Toddle to prove to myself that it actually worked. That was
and you did
otherwise I didn't trust it. Yeah.
You did it. And I love that Toddle's built in Toddle, because what other framework is built in its own framework either? I can think it's very clever.
Yeah, I mean, quite a lot of programming languages, to be honest. It's very common, that world. Even TypeScript up until apparently now, where they're rebuilding it, rewriting it. But most programming languages follow that same idea of writing their own compiler. So it's based on a long and serious tradition as well. And it just makes it easier.
Very serious product. Very serious product.
Well, thank you very much for coming on, Selma. This has been great. We're super excited for you that you joined the team, and all the stuff you've done so far and all the stuff that's coming are going to be really interesting. I think it's going to be a whole different world for people trying to learn Toddle and web development in general. So I'm really looking forward to everything that's going to happen there.
Me too.
And this is the first episode of our podcast. We're quite excited about this idea. We'll be bringing on a ton of guests to talk about all sorts of aspects of building web applications. Some of it will be Toddle related. Most of it will be not specifically about Toddle. It'll be about the web. It'll be about software development. It'll be about team dynamics and how to work with designers, how to work with engineers, all those kind of questions.
Real life stuff.
Interesting people we can, and we'll find a ton of interesting people that can join us. So make sure to subscribe, so you get notifications when new videos and episode comes out. And thank you very much for watching, and thank you very much, Selma, for joining.
Thank you. Bye.